Hi, this is Abdul Bharti and we are here in Den Haag in Netherlands, and today we have with us Julian Fischer. You are CEO and founder of anynines, and we are here at the Cloud Foundry Summit. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Same here. Tell us a bit about the name of the company. What does the company do and how did you come up with this name?
Well, server availability is often measured in number of percent availability. So it is quite common to say a server has 99 or 99.9 or 99.99% availability. And as we are focusing on building application platforms and operating them on behalf of customers, we thought that it makes sense to indicate that with any nines, you can basically get an arbitrary number of nines depending on your requirements.
And you touched upon it just a bit. Just elaborate a bit on what does the company do?
It's about building application developer platforms, usually as part of a digital transformation process within a company. These companies have agilized their development and subsequently need a platform to keep up with the cadence of application releases and put them into operations. And anynines is basically focused on technologies such as Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes. We complete them with data services and then offer those platform solutions to customers.
And if I'm not wrong, you have been involved with Cloud Foundry from the very early days.
Yes, I was actually attending a ChefConf in 2012 in Palo Alto. When I saw talk about Cloud Foundry, I tweeted, and James Waters, being at VMware at that time, so it was before Pivotal was founded, invited me to come to Palo Alto and talk to him. And that's what I did. And a few months later, we started our first Cloud Foundry installation in Europe, publicly facing parseanynines.com. And then, things got crazy, and we've been dragged into several enterprise accounts to help bootstrapping their Cloud Foundry environments, which then transformed us into a more enterprise-facing company.
So, realistically, over the years, how has Cloud Foundry been helping, organizations with their development process?
Well, in contrast to any developer-driven community, such as the Docker community, the Cloud Foundry community has always been very strong in driving adoption from the C-level in a more top-down approach. So we have seen large corporate clients along the way. And if you look into the challenge that the CIO is facing to how would you pick an application developer platform that withstands the requirements and the scale requirements of a large corporate, and in order how to and answer the question, how to governance policies on such a platform, Cloud Foundry has been and is the answer to that. Mm-hmm. So now there's Kubernetes on its way, but still, Kubernetes has to live up to the standards that have been forged within Cloud Foundry over the years, being used in those enterprise accounts.
So how do you see the whole convergence, or integration between Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes?
If you want to look at the question how the convergence will going to be in the future, it's, I think, a good starting point to let go of the terms. Mm-hmm. Because Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes is so highly, let's say, associated with certain pictures that we forget what it is actually about. Mm-hmm. It is basically about bringing agile development together with agile operations so that applications can be deployed and operated easily. That's the pain that needs to be mitigated and relieved. And whether the solution is called Kubernetes or it's called Cloud Foundry or it's any mixture, it doesn't really matter as long as it serves the purpose. So it should be a mission-driven conversation. Now, if you look back in the history of Cloud Foundry, you will see that Cloud Foundry has been changing over times, many times. So we started where Cloud Foundry had data service attached to them. Then they have been deprecated, moved away. We have seen that the application runtime has been replaced, the container orchestrator has been replaced with DEAs, which has then in turn been replaced by Diego. And now with Rini, maybe Diego is going to be replaced by Kubernetes. But for me, being in that community for a while, what doesn't really it's not something new. It's just an adoption that's necessary to take into consideration that the container orchestration has been solved by Kubernetes, and Kubernetes becomes the prime standard to solve that problem. And as Kubernetes is a bit more general purpose than Diego, it is fair to replace Diego with Kubernetes at some point. I wouldn't recommend to do that today, but it is good to see projects such as Irini showing that there will be a migration path from whatever does Cloud Foundry in your company today to go to a Kubernetes-based Cloud Foundry tomorrow. Then, when you take that as a given thing, the question is the Cloud Foundry user experience going to survive? Well, it will for sure, because if you take the user experience of a bare Kubernetes, it doesn't really compare to Cloud Foundry. It doesn't give you orgs, it gives you namespaces, but it doesn't give you that same multi-tenancy experience. It doesn't give you build packs. You don't have a means to push your source code directly, but you have to build container images instead. So it's not a one-to-one comparison. But the Kubernetes ecosystem with Knative, for example, or projects such as KF, they come up with alternative solutions that will try to compete with Cloud Foundry and the CF push experience. And in return, Cloud Foundry will adapt Kubernetes. So the question is whether those technologies will keep spiraling and somehow be forged into something. Maybe it will be called Kubernetes project whatever, or it will continue to be called Cloud Foundry. But that is not important. But I'm pretty sure that the essence of Cloud Foundry will survive, and that there will have to be migration path to whatever is there today to what is there tomorrow. Whether this is going to include BOSH as the underlying infrastructure automation, or whether Kubernetes becomes the infrastructure API of tomorrow, and you'll put your Cloud Foundry on top of that, or whether Cloud Foundry will include Knative tomorrow. These are the things we should lay back and wait how this plays out. I just have the optimism that what is the inner value of Cloud Foundry, being governance, being user experience, is going to survive. The label you attach to it is not really important.
So what are the trends that you have been seeing when it comes to digital transformation when companies adopt these technologies?
Well, currently you can see a paralysis. People see that there's a blending, a mixture between Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes, and they are uncertain about which option to choose. For example, I've been giving 2 talks, Knative versus Irini, as well as Kubernetes being the new OpenStack, and people ask me, do I have to set up Kubernetes now? Is the time for a Cloud Foundry over? And I wouldn't say that this is the case, because the entire Cloud Foundry stack is rock solid. It has been proven. We have accounts where there are thousands of virtual machines, and you can operate such an environment with a fistful of people. Is the degree of automation and the depth of the automation and the reliability and predictability is way beyond anything I've ever seen. We are looking at a platform that has hundreds of components, literally. And now you take Kubernetes, and if you build a Kubernetes from the Getting Started guide, this works like charm. But you put Knative on top and whatever other components you require, it actually dissolves all those deployments into several resources that have been created across the cluster. Can you keep track of that? Can you organize a reliable day 2 operations and provide that at the scale of 3,000 VMs? Is something that I would like to see in reality. So we are in a fashion industry, and hypes come and hypes go. I've been in the OpenStack community, and nobody thought that OpenStack will ever be challenged by something. And now there's Kubernetes. So I would say we really need to subtract the hype from the conversation to see where the actual value is. And the following picture appears. Pivotal paid a lot of people building Diego. When this is a solved problem and Kubernetes becomes a standard for orchestration, it makes sense to relieve that power, that people power, take it away from Diego and take what's there, and it is that the expenses on container orchestration is shared by a larger community. From the economical perspective, that makes sense. Preserve the tooling around that and the user experience around that is what I'd like to see happening, so that developers don't have to care whether they're deployed to Kubernetes or whether they're deploying to Diego.
Right.
And I think that's the point. And I'm pretty sure that with the commitments made by large corporates, it must happen that there will be a path of migration. And this is something that I see my personal mission with our company and our customers is to find the right timing to settle or change from a Diego to a Kubernetes. I don't think the time is now. It may be in the near future.
But that is the path.
Yes.
Perfect. Can you talk about, what are the unique challenges that companies face when they try to containerize the stateful workloads, and what is going on in this area?
Let's categorize stateful workloads into three categories, or state-related workloads into three categories. The first is stateless. It has no state. You can put it into a Cloud Foundry, you can put it into a container. The container can be failing and restarted somewhere else, which is the basic benefit from that. So any application server will do the trick. So any Kubernetes node, any Diego cell can start your container and you're good to go. Now the second category of applications with state is state that is lightweight. It is an application that is somehow 12-factor compliant. It does not really have much of state, but a bit. And it actually needs that state in order to work. Could be an application writing several files to the file system and expecting the files to be there in case the container has to be restarted because underlying host maintenance is done. In that particular case, Kubernetes offers the ability to create a container and attach a volume to it that will keep that state. But you don't have to provide strong I/O isolation in that case. Now, this leads us to a third category where there's a heavyweight state. Let's say a database. In a database, you're not talking about an app that has a bit of state, but you have an application where state is actually the whole point. And if you utilize a database quite frequently, you'll have a lot of I/O load. You put that in a container and you collocate two of these containers on one node, they will start interfering because they potentially will drain the I/O capacity or bandwidth of the underlying machine. And at that point, from the individual application developer's perspective, their databases become unpredictable regarding their performance because there is a bad neighborhood issue between two co-located containers and their location is decided by the scheduler and developers have barely any impact or any possibility to change that. Well, you could work around that by, for example, using labels to do host and affinity and anti-affinity, but this requires knowledge about the infrastructure, something that you actually want to hide. So the automation of heavyweight applications such as databases is currently not something you would do within a Kubernetes. Maybe you would do that tomorrow when there are going to be containers as a choice to be more isolated, so that you could have a stateful set for a database. But today, we recommend using virtual machine automation instead. Something we've been spending our years to build. And for example, in Cloud Foundry, it was clear you have applications and data servers have to be somewhere else. So we created a framework in automation around a data service that do on-demand provisioning of databases on a per VM, per service instance basis.
So Julian, thank you so much for not only telling us a bit about the company, but also, you have touched upon some core, which is more about solving the problem, not about labels and a specific technology. So I would love to keep in touch and continue this discussion in future. And as you know, we'll be seeing each other in the next event, which should be Kubernetes. So once again, thank you so much for showing up today. And as I said, looking forward to talk to you again.
And thank you very much for the interesting conversation. We'll keep an eye on what's happening, and maybe our next update will have some answers that are currently still in the blender. We're waiting for the results to show up.